which is Give or Take from Giveon, the I guess like debut, but really Giveon's just been absolutely crushing the charts. I mean, you
Yeah.
go on his Spotify, man, unbelievable. I mean, he's the 107th most listened to artist in the world right now, according to Spotify. But I mean, he's on songs that just did numbers.
Hmm.
Peaches, the version that he's on with Daniel Caesar, and obviously Bieber, Heartbreak Anniversary, and Chicago Freestyle all have at least over 400 million streams, with Peaches being
Hmm.
over a billion streams. Dude, I had no idea Peaches had that many. That's
That's
insane.
a record and song of the year nominee, my guy.
Insane. I didn't realize it was doing numbers like that. But yeah, so Giveon is someone that we've been aware of. Has a couple of projects under his belt, but this is technically his like studio
Right.
album
Yeah.
debut.
Two EPs
Um,
came out in 2020, then he released them like combined as a compilation album. So this is like the
mhm.
proper debut album of new music.
And what was your overall temperature on listening through Give or Take?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think going in with his Giveon album, having heard some of the music to this point, having heard I think Heartbreak Anniversary, which is like kind of an unconventional TikTok hit, unconventional TikTok rise as a slower ballad song, not what you necessarily associate with dance challenges or
Yeah.
virality online. Nonetheless, it is one of those songs still. Knowing this music, I think also just kind of thinking about like male R&B music. We talk so much about like the wave of female R&B singers these days, of
Mm.
which there are many, many to celebrate. And I think male R&B, a lot of the 2010s was kind of dry for male R&B music, and we haven't really even talked about a whole lot of it, to be honest. For that reason, I think apart from someone who's like obviously celebrated and kind of like almost above the space, like Frank Ocean, it's kind of been up and down. And I'm very curious to see the reception of the Brent Faiyaz album in a week's time
Mm.
because I feel like him and Giveon are kind of like the true like faces of male R&B at this time, this very moment, in terms of like who's the hottest, who's making music people care about, and and apologies to Daniel Caesar, but I just kind of put those two above him. And I think with Giveon's like talent is like he has such a rich voice, but very specifically that baritone that he
Yeah.
has makes him stand out because he's different. And like a falsetto from Giveon just sounds different.
Yeah,
And
it's like I was talking with somebody, and that baritone almost sounds like he's like slowed down his voice intentionally through like some sort of auto tune. Like it's crazy. I've never heard a voice quite like that.
right, and I mean, he does. I think like song structure wise, he kind of does what you expect. It's ballad heavy for sure, and his biggest songs like Heartbreak Anniversary are ballads. Is a ballad, so that makes sense. So I think going in, I was kind of impressed that there were a few moments where it was like a bit more up tempo
Mm.
than your traditional balladry R&B album. For Tonight in particular stood out to me. One of the singles, the drums on there, just overall up tempo, and even though it's still a very ballady chorus, I feel like that production kind of feels like a different lane for Giveon. Having heard the other music. Um, Overall, though, I think it's kind of what you expect. You have Another Heartbreak, which kind of feels like a sequel track in a sense to the
Mhm.
biggest song of his career to this point. Um, and it is actually kind of funny to think that like he's on Peaches with Bieber, which was a great look for Bieber to give him because Giveon's career has risen very fast. But like Peaches is a song that's like so unlike like what Giveon's actual music is like.
Mhm.
And perhaps that sets the wrong expectations for people that weren't actually fans of him and perhaps aren't male R&B or R&B fans per se. They're more pop fans. Who knows? But yeah, I think overall this kind of does what I expected it to do. I don't know if it really changed my opinion on Giveon, but like I said, very curious to see what the other side of the coin looks like with Brent Faiyaz in a week.
You know, in listening through to him, one of the artists that really came to mind was Sam Smith, who I think is
Hmm.
another person in this like R&B space with like a very unique voice, but also like came out with some hits at the beginning of his career, especially collaborating with Disclosure, that I think almost like set the expectations for him to be much different than his music really ended up being. And Sam Smith leans more into the dance sphere than Giveon does. So they're not like a one for one comparison. But I hear a lot of what we heard on some of those early Sam Smith albums, and I think like the subsequent like sophomore album that really like fell flat because like yeah, you're right. After after knowing that we were gonna listen to this, I wanted to go back and hear like what hits been popping off, and obviously you hear Peaches, and you're like, man, like such a shot of adrenaline. Songs just bubblegum perfection, and then this album is just a lot slower. It's pretty much pure R&B, except for maybe a few tracks, and while his voice sounds awesome and unique and I couldn't help but just think how he might be better utilized as like a feature on dance, tracks or
Yeah.
like the backing vocals for a rapper rather than maybe like someone I want to listen to singularly.
Yeah, I mean, he of course broke out with
Yeah.
Chicago Freestyle with Drake, where it's exactly what you say, where he's just kind of laying down the chorus for
Hmm.
Drake raps. Of course, that was on Darkwing demo tapes in 2020. So yeah, I feel like that's how I approach a lot of R&B artists, where it's like you have these talents, but I feel like the unless there's like some like really impressive concept, when we're talking about like Frank or like go further back, like D'Angelo or someone, I don't know, but like this like the run of the mill R&B album always feels like kind of safe by definition to me. And
Yeah.
when you have like a really impressive or at least very unique vocalist like you have in Giveon, um, it is cool to think about what else you can get from that person. You know, because I feel
Hmm.
like he kind of comes across as a wholesome performer and he has wholesome lyrics and yeah, I think quite lyrically at the end there in Unholy Matrimony. But like you know, not to keep bringing up Brent Fayez, but like Brent Fayez is again the other side of the coin because he's toxic as fuck. You know, that's not what
Yeah.
Giveon is. Giveon's more of like the like music you put on at the restaurant. I don't know, like it's just different.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely a lot of people who really love R&B, and I think there's a lot of like desire to have that sphere be more robust. You think back to like the 1990s and 2000s, and R&B was top of the charts a lot of the times. Boys to Men was like absolutely
Right.
dominating, during their time, and it's just like I guess I just don't know if it's a movement in terms of what people want in terms of popular music at this point, or if it's just that the talent in that sphere has just changed or moved in different directions that just don't hit as well. But it just
Yeah.
feels like there's like a real emptiness. But we're taking away a little bit from the actual like I think album
Hmm.
because I do think there are some things to like on here, right? And I think one of the tracks that stood out to me was "At Least We Tried." I really love his performance on that one. I just think like it's very toned down, but it really just allows him to like really show out that like R&B vocal performance and kind of go all over the place. And he kind of comes out of that baritone at times in a way that I think allows me to like really appreciate how good of a singer he is cuz like I said, sometimes when he's just sitting in that baritone for like the whole song, I'm almost like is this just auto-tune? Like I actually thought um I thought what's the hit there? Heartbreak, whatever the
Anniversary.
yeah, anniversary, the TikTok song. I actually thought that was just auto tuned like low. I thought that was just slowed down to be that way. So I was like totally surprised when I found out that was just his actual voice. So yeah, that was one that I thought he kind of broke out of that mold a little bit. Were there any tracks that you really liked though?
Yeah, I mentioned for tonight just for the more
Yep.
up tempo production. I think overall too, I did appreciate the kind of the framing of the story of this album in terms of him like having like it being in conversation with his mother and like talking
Mm,
about what he's done, what he's gonna do, things like that's kind of cool. But yeah, I think like to your point, there can be times where the performance can sound almost nondescript, even though it's like strong singing. You know, I feel like that's a big negative for like blacks music, Six Lax music. You know, it's just
mhm.
very nondescript. Givion's
Right.
voice though is strong enough that he can still push through, and even like a down the middle Giveon song still sounds quite nice
Mhm.
because I think he's just that level of singer. So you know, I
Yeah.
think if I was a bigger R&B fan, I'd probably like connect more with like the overall like vision of this album a little bit more. But you know, it's hard not to be impressed with the vocal talent. Um, and yeah, I mean, like you kind of said, I mean, there is a kind of a sense of devoid sense of openness with male R&B because everyone who does this kind of goes pop, goes dance or something, right? The
Yeah.
Weekend, Khalid,
Yeah.
Ty Dolla Sign, more hip hop, more guest spotting, the list goes on. Chris Brown, of course. So the fact that Giveon to this point though is still really, making R&B music. I think perhaps that's commendable in its own regard. He's really sticking to his guns.
Yeah, that I really like that point. Just want to shout out one more song for tonight, which if you're gonna go with the Sam Smith comparison, man, I mean that song feels just like "Stay with Me" from Sam Smith's breakout album or debut album, I should say.
Mhm.
So I thought that was another standout track and one where you kind of hear him pushing both ends of the range, going from the high baritone to his higher uh, vocal performance in this. So I think there are probably going to be more interesting things to come from Giveon, but for a first studio album, I think that this is a decent debut, and yeah, he's gonna be someone we're talking about for quite a while. So follow the Nowstalgia Best of 2022 playlist, where we'll be putting a Giveon song on that, as well as all the songs that we enjoy from the week.